Hello, today I wanted to take an opportunity to use our time that we have together to go over some multi-step equations since we haven't had an opportunity to practice them in class. I pulled some of these randomly from the sheets that are attached in this lesson. If you're not present in school today, I'd like you to go over this. And then if you are, you can decide which equations you prefer to go over. So let's get started. We see it's number 4 on the worksheet, but our first problem looks like we have the distributive property, and then we have some integers to be concerned about. So the very first thing I'll acknowledge is that I see this kind of minus sign before the parentheses. So one way to deal with that would be to put a 1 in between. So now I'm going to distribute a negative 1 to this term and a negative 1 to this term, but I also want to pay close attention to the fact that there's a minus in front of 13, so I'm going to look at it like it's a negative. Now before I start, I've completely ignored that 7, so I want to drop it down. It's not part of the distributive property, and I don't want to forget that it's there. So negative 1 times positive 5t would be negative 5t. And negative 1 times negative 13 would be positive 13. And then on the other side, we're just going to drop down negative 25. Our next step is we want to gather up like terms. Now this is just a personal preference. I prefer to start with terms that have the variable, and in this case there's a minus in front of it, so I'm going to choose to put that as negative 5t. And then I'm going to gather up my constants. I have a 7 and a plus 13, so together positive 7 and positive 13 make positive 20. And then I'm just going to drop down that negative 25. Now, I could have rewritten this. Another way to write this, I could have started with the constants, and I would have gotten positive 20, gathering up the 7 and 13, and then I could have brought down minus 5t. So this is an equivalent equation, and if you would prefer to write it that way, that's just fine. Now I'm to my solving step. I have a 2-step equation, meaning I have a constant to eliminate and I have a coefficient, and we always start with a constant. So I see plus 20, so I'm going to take away 20 on both sides. So it eliminates here. However, sometimes this is problematic. So there's 2 ways you can handle it. You can take a negative 25 if you have a calculator and put minus 20 because that's what we've written. Or you can look at this like it's a negative 25 and you're combining it with a negative 20. Either way, this is going to become negative 45. And on the other side, we have negative 5t left. Our final solving step is to eliminate the constant. So I'm going to divide by negative 5 on both sides. It's not a positive 5 because the inverse operation I'm using is division, and I need to have a negative divided by negative to get a positive variable t. So here's my positive t, and on the other side again I have a negative divided by negative, and that would be positive 9. Next, we're going to tackle a problem that has variables on both sides. And I see the distributive property on both sides. So just sometimes before I simplify, I will go ahead and build a wall. That way, I just want to remind you we don't cross over this wall until after both sides are as simplified as possible, with a term with a constant and another term. We can't cross over the line unless we're doing an opposite operation. So we're going to start with 3 times x, and then 3 times not 4, but negative 4, which would be negative or minus 12. So on the next side, we're going to distribute also. We have 2 times negative 2x, that's going to be negative 4x, and then we have 2 times positive 1, and that would be plus 2. So in this particular problem, we have a term on both sides that has the variable x. And so we want to start by eliminating one. Once again, personal preference, or what we're encouraging you to do, is to get rid of the weaker one, meaning the one that's the least. This is a negative 4x, this is a positive 3x. And we do that only to try to avoid negatives, because negatives often cause errors. So I'm going to add 4x to eliminate a negative 4x, and I'm now solving. The first step was simplifying, and I have 7x minus 12, and on the other side we have positive 2. So our next solving step would be to eliminate the constant. I see minus 12, so I'm going to do the opposite, which is adding 12. This eliminates the constant, and now I have 7x equals 14. And finally, we want to eliminate the coefficient. That means the number that's working with the variable, co-worker with the variable. So I'm going to divide, because side by side means multiply, so we're going to do the opposite, which is dividing. And so our final answer is x equals 2. Now this next equation, we haven't dealt with one like this before. So I'm going to start by simplifying. I'm just going to write a simplified version. What if I were given k over 2 equals 11? Well, we want to recall that this fraction bar also means division in math. So if I were to solve this, I would look at this as k divided by 2, and I would do the opposite. I would multiply by 2, and I'd multiply by 2 on both sides. What would happen is would eliminate, leaving my k on this side, and then the answer. So, but we didn't just have k, we had a lot more going on here up at the top, but we're going to use that same concept. I'm going to start solving, and I want to look at this as dividing by 2. So I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to look at this as a quantity, and I'm going to multiply by 2. And if I multiply by 2 on that side, I have to multiply by 2 on this side. Now here's the beauty of this. These cancel each other out, and I'm left with negative 8 minus 3k equals 22. And now I have a two-step equation. I'm going to eliminate the constant, the number without the variable, first. I see negative 8, so I'm going to put positive 8 or plus 8. And again, I have to do that on both sides. It eliminates my constant, and I have negative 3k left. I'm using the minus as a negative, and on this side we have 30. So we have one more thing to eliminate, and that's the coefficient of k, the number that's multiplying k. So I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to divide by that negative 3, and our final answer would be k equals negative 10. Now, the most common error I'm seeing when you're solving, not you personally, but in general, is that the negative signs and the integer signs are causing us some difficulty. So the signs are something I want you to pay very close attention to, and your calculator's your friend. Feel free to use it. So now we're going to try to apply multi-step equations and kind of mix it in with our geometry. And so this would be kind of an application of this. So we don't have a chance to talk about geometry as much as we'd like, but there are many applications where algebra and geometry are involved. In fact, that's why you do your algebra courses before your geometry courses most of the time. So I want you to know that when you see this little hash mark on a figure, for instance, I see this little one hash mark on both those lines, it's telling me that this side length and this side length are the same. And since they told me that this one is 13 millimeters, I now know that this is 13 millimeters. But you're going to notice that the bottom lengths obviously are longer. You can see visually they're longer. And they also have 2 hash marks, which means this is telling us that it's different length than the sides that have 1 hash mark. But the fact that they both have 2 lets us know that these 2 lengths are equal. And knowing they're equal, that's going to allow me to set this expression equal to this expression, which means we're going to be able to figure out what the variable s is. So we're going to start by writing 2s plus 8 plus 3 times the quantity, 6 plus s. So that is what we have on this side. And now that equals s plus 2, which is this side. So we're going to be able to answer what s is, and once we know what s is, we can know the side length by using the easier of the 2 expressions. And so now we're going to start. And I'm not very fond of the variable s because my s's kind of look like the number 5. So let's get started. I'm immediately noticing that I see parentheses, and I want you to kind of think about these terms kind of being trapped inside the parentheses, and I can't combine anything until I use my distributive property. We have to release the parentheses. So 2s is not affected by the parentheses, and neither is 8, so I'm just going to drop them down. And now this is very important. Every time you have distributive property in the middle of a problem, would you make sure you're looking at your sign in front of the number? So I'm going to distribute what I'm going to look at as a positive 3 times 6, so that would be positive 18, and then a positive 3. Now again, I have to pay attention to the operation sign in front. Positive 3 times positive s would be positive 3s. And now this other side, I'm just going to drop it down. It's kind of hanging out, waiting for me to simplify the left side. Our next step, and this is one of the lessons, is 5 steps of simplifying and solving. We're going to combine terms. So I see 2 s's here, and I see 2 s's here. Remember, I cannot cross over that equal sign until I'm doing an inverse operation and ready to solve. So I have 2 s's on this side, 3 more s's. So on this left side, I have 5s. Now I'm going to go for my constants. I have a constant of positive 8 and positive 18 together, combined together. That'd be positive or plus 26. And now that other side is just s plus 22. Now I'm ready to solve because on both sides I have a term that have variables, and I have a term that's a constant. That's as simplified as it can be. And now I'm ready to do the solving step. So we're going to drop our wall. And when we have variables on both sides, we're going to eliminate one of them. Well, if I eliminated 5s, I'd have to take minus 5s away from, I'd have to take 5s away from 1s, and I'm going to get a negative 4. So since we're trying to avoid negatives, I'm going to choose the weaker or the least of the terms, and so I'm going to take away 1s. And when we do that, we have 4s plus 26 equals 22. And it's a positive 22. Again, I want to pay attention to those signs. If this would have been a minus 22, it would have dropped it down as a negative. And we're going to continue our solving step. Our next solving step is to eliminate the constant. So I'm going to eliminate the constant. And on this side, it eliminates, dropping down 4s. But here we go. We're not going to be able to avoid a negative because I have 22 minus 26. So in your calculator, you're going to put 22 minus 26, or you're going to look at this like it's a positive 22, and you're adding a negative 26, in which either case you're going to get negative 4. Our final solving step is to eliminate the coefficient by dividing, and we have s equals negative 1. So How is this going to help me? Well, if I want to know the length of this side, I'm going to start with the easier expression because remember, they're both equal. So if I had S plus 22, and I now know that S is -1, I can now figure that the length of this side is 21, and I'm looking at the units, millimeters. So that's how we can apply our algebra to geometric figures. So I hope this lesson was helpful. The more we practice and the more we see this, the better we get. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.